Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from Am I the A-Hole? Story 1 is by Acrobatic Main 2106. Am I the a-hole for blowing up on my husband's friend after her wife died? I'm a 36 female, my husband Ian is 44, and he's close friends with a woman named Jenna. They've been friends for a long time, before Ian and I got together, so I know her fairly well too, but we have really nothing in common, and we're not exactly friends. Jenna's wife Laura very sadly and somewhat suddenly passed in early March. She was terminally ill but responding to treatment very well and was expected to survive another 2 to 5 years. She's been leaning on Ian heavily for support, which I understand, but she's been at our house every single day since and even sleeping in our guest room most nights because she doesn't want to be home alone. Which would be okay, except she's getting more and more passive-aggressive towards me and weirdly territorial of Ian. I've reminded myself that I don't think I could stand to see a happy couple for months if I lost Ian, and to be patient. It's not personal. My birthday was on Sunday. I got home Saturday after a morning out and Jenna was there. I was making small talk when I asked Ian what time he made dinner reservations for the next day. Jenna inserted herself right here and asked Ian if he was going to be out the next day, and he said yes. She started panicking and saying that he couldn't and she wasn't ready to spend an evening alone. I was going to tell her that she could still hang out here while we were gone, and she looked at me and said, "Don't you have any effing friends you can go with?" And I just blew the F up. Don't you have any other effing friends you can go bother? And so on. She called me selfish for monopolizing my husband, and I had enough and told her to get the F out of my house and not to come back, ever. Ian had been trying to calm things down between us, but it spiraled out of control fast, and he ended up escorting Jenna out and telling her that he'd come visit her in a few days, but he would be backing my decision because of how she spoke to me. I was happy for his support and still am, but it's been a few days and I just feel bad all around about it. I should have been more understanding of her, but I also feel like she should treat me more respectfully, and I'm not really sure if I overreacted. She's staying at your house. There's no romantic thing here because she lost a wife, so she's a lesbian. She's not trying to, take your husband away from you or anything. But she absolutely needs to be respectful of you, and she does not get to go off on you when it's the day before your birthday and you want to go out and have dinner with your husband. And she has a problem with that. She doesn't get to just control him all the time. It doesn't matter what's going on in her life. She needs to go home. There's a healing process to follow here, and she is not following it. Not at all. She should be at home. Down in the comments by Sailing Seas 25. Not the a-hole. She was so far out of line, and especially in your own home. I'd also sit down with your husband and talk about it. To me personally, it really seems like she likes your husband more than just a good friend. I understand she had a wife, but maybe she's bi and hasn't been open with it. Underneath that by the OP. I seriously doubt it. I don't think I'm welcome to use the same term she uses for herself, but it starts with B-U-L-L. The only word I can think of is BS, and that doesn't fit here. Underneath that by Historical Agent 9426. She may not want your husband as an intimate partner, but she may feel her grief entitles her to claim him as an emotional partner. Just because she doesn't want to replace you in his bed doesn't mean she doesn't resent you for taking up space in his life. She didn't resent you before because she had a wife, but now that the wife is gone, why the heck are you still around? Good for your husband for standing up for you. It sounds like you reached your breaking point with Jenna, and though you may have responded in a way you regret, it was a response to her inappropriate behavior and comments. You should apologize to your husband for not speaking up sooner and allowing things to get to that point. And yes, I agree with this person. Your husband sounds amazing. You always want your significant other to have your back in a situation like this instead of taking their side, which happens so often in these stories. Our next story is by Valuable Term 9487. Am I the a-hole for saying my sister-in-law is a doctor on the plane during an emergency, even though she was asleep? My sister Allison, who's 33, her wife Elizabeth, who's 35, and their 2 kids, Claude and Ava, both 5, were going on a family vacation together. They were kind enough to invite me, I'm a 28 male, as well since I'm going through a breakup. We were on an 8-hour plane en route to our destination. I was just relaxing in my seat when 2 hours into the flight attendant asks if there were any doctors on board, since there was an emergency. No one said they were. Now, Elizabeth is a brilliant general surgeon, so without really thinking about it, I said there was a doctor. When I turned to tell her, I noticed Elizabeth and Allison were already comfortably asleep and holding hands. I woke them up and said they were looking for a doctor because there was an emergency. Elizabeth gave me a very nasty look and went to the back with the flight attendant. Allison looked a bit upset as well. When she came back, she had the most angry, pissed-off face I've ever seen on her, which is rare because she's usually a very sweet person. She avoided me the entire time. When I asked her what was wrong, she said that she was tired as heck when she boarded the plane and just wanted to spend time with her family without carrying her work with herself. I defended myself, saying that when the flight attendant asked and no one else was available, I told them about her. She said I should have just kept quiet and let her get much-needed sleep. I said there was an emergency and her help was needed and appreciated, and not helping would have been wrong. She just laughed and avoided me. Even after we got to our destination, she only hung out with Allison and their kids, simply avoided me. I wanted to ask if what I did was really this wrong. Am I the a-hole? Honestly, to me, it depends on how much of an emergency it actually was, and I wasn't there. I don't know the situation. If the person was dying, then you absolutely should have woken her up. Yes, she's not going to get paid for this. Yes, she's on vacation, but if she saves somebody's life, why would she be mad about that? It makes me think that this situation really wasn't that much of an emergency. Maybe somebody just had a small allergic reaction, or if it wasn't a big-time emergency, you shouldn't have woken her up. But if they're coming around the plane saying, is there a doctor on the plane, it's usually dire. So I don't know why she has such a problem with it. Down in the comments by FastPop8911, you should apologize. I recently had this conversation with a friend of mine who was an ER doc who was explaining why he didn't stop on the road at an accident site after a night shift where he was on his way to have a fun day with friends. I didn't realize this before the conversation, but he explained that as a doctor, if you stop and help, you are then liable for that person's care until you can hand them off to someone of a higher or similar care ability. So for him, another ER doctor. That meant that had he stopped to help, he would have had to travel with any people he was treating in the ambulance all the way to the nearest hospital, and then do a handoff there. After a full overnight shift when he had other plans he was looking forward to, and being about an hour away from the nearest ER, he wasn't willing to do so when he knew there was already other emergency personnel on the scene who could do just as much as he could. He also told me this is why he always drinks immediately when getting on a plane, so that he can say he's impaired if any emergencies come up and he isn't liable for taking someone off the plane to the nearest hospital, ruining his trip for himself and whoever he's traveling with. I'm in the US and I don't know what laws are everywhere. I'm sure they're different, but I would bet the general rule applies. Doctors that volunteer are then obligated to follow rules and laws that could severely impact them and those they are with, and they should get to decide for themselves what they are willing to do. The laws in place kind of suck for that, if that's the case, where they have to see through the care of the individual. But if you're a doctor on a plane and somebody is potentially dying, or somewhere near you is potentially dying, and somebody else can't save their life and you do, I would think that'd be more important than having a nice vacation. And I get that you don't want to be on the job 24/7, absolutely not. But this is one profession where you really don't get to choose. If somebody's dying, and the flight attendant's coming to you and saying, please, there's an emergency, somebody will die if we don't get help. Can you imagine this ER doctor just got plastered before getting on the plane because he didn't want to have to be asked to help people because he didn't want his vacation to be ruined? That seems absurd to me. It started out good. I think that you should still apologize. If it's a real emergency where somebody might die, they should help. But what do you guys think? Does being a doctor kind of obligate you into a situation where you should be helping people? When they talked about the roadside situation, there were paramedics there. They could help the person. There's no doctor on a plane, and you're the only doctor, and you don't want to help because your vacation might get ruined and you missed out on some sleep? It seems absurd to me to say something like that. Down in the comments again by Co Mama, I don't believe that is completely true, talking about the first person's comment. My husband is a paramedic and he would never allow some man who claims to be a doctor on his ambulance. That puts everyone at risk. If other care shows up, such as paramedics, the doctor can leave, at least in my state. Underneath that by no name 22415. I'm a paramedic and it is true to an extent. It depends if the doctor on site has assumed care. If they have, they cannot hand off care to a lower credential. That is patient abandonment. If they had just spoken with the person and asked some questions, however, just an example, then the paramedic can take over. Our last story today is by Zookeeper 73572. Am I the a-hole for putting my wife on a strict allowance and making her ask me permission to buy expensive things? When we married, we decided not to fully combine our finances. We have a shared account in which I fund 3/4 and she funds 1/4. We use this account to pay the mortgage, utilities, groceries, etc. We also have our separate accounts where we deposit the rest of our money. We are responsible for our own investments and cars. Things worked well for a couple years until recently when she came to me crying. It turns out my wife is not good with her money and owes $150,000 spread over several credit cards and her car loan. Unless she wins the lottery, there's no way she would be able to pay off her debt, and I didn't want to mess up her credit by declaring bankruptcy. I decided to loan her the money to pay off the debt on strict conditions. I will take over her finances, including receiving her income. She will be placed on a strict allowance and budget. She will have to ask permission to buy anything over $50 and have to go by my judgment. Once she pays me back the money, she can take control over her finances. She argued against the conditions until I pointed out that I don't have $150,000 in cash stuff in the couch. I will have to sell some assets, including stocks that are currently performing well. If I loan her the money, it will cost me money. She finally agreed. This weekend, we were at a dinner party where, after too many drinks, some of the women decided they wanted to take a girls' trip a few weekends from now. My wife turned to ask me if she could go, and I answered no, it's not in her budget. I'll spare you the details of the argument that erupted, but the TLDR is that I'm a misogynist pig who keeps her on a leash. Some argued I should have bailed her out without conditions because there should be none in a marriage. The hurtful part is that she didn't once defend me. So, was I wrong to put those conditions on her? The situation she got herself into made this a requirement for your relationship. The only thing I think is that maybe at the time you should have said to her, we're going to discuss that later. I don't want to discuss that now. She put the burden on you by asking you in the first place. She should have known what the answer is. But it sounds like she was inebriated, as everybody else was. So, the drinks in this situation seem to have led to this argument. No, you're not the a-hole. Down in the comments by Sufficient Way 3663. OP, better keep her SSN on hand. Check her credit report every now and again. Credit cards are so easy to hide. Reminds me of the husband who wanted to buy the $175,000 boat for the family, and he made plenty to do it. But his wife's credit cards were out of control. She agreed to not use them or tell him when she did so he could pay the small allowance amount and show the statements. Ready to buy the boat, he wanted to double-check her credit cards and she refused to show him for over 3 days. He had to back out of the boat. Kids were devastated, all because she couldn't be trusted with money or to even show him statements. OP, be prepared for your wife to renege on this deal. She kinda already did. And she'll use it as a wedge in the marriage and blame her bitterness and resentment and the lack of marital interest, all on this. She may even do things like quit her job or accept less hours or income and then claim hardship, use a pregnancy and kids, a sudden increase in your salary, etc., to say you need to cover her expenses. It'll be so exhausting, the constant reminder of your sacrifice and arguing your stance, and she feels emboldened by friends who are biased anyway. You'll be run down with mistrust, resentment, anger, and marital discord that you'll finally give up. Our stories for today have come to a close. Until we meet again, have a glorious day.